talking today. We're continuing in this series of matter versus what matters. And okay, yeah, there's a bit of a delay here on my live version, but I'm figuring this out, trying different things. But we're talking about matter versus what matters. And we talked yesterday, and I encourage you to listen to each video in this series because I'm hopefully building on something and building a case that is all about helping us have a greater understanding of the nature of reality and the greater tools of self-reflection and contemplation to understand reality so that we can interact with an ever greater realization of what reality is. In other words, as I talked about in my talk yesterday, our map of reality is formed by our experiences. When we are growing up, we have experiences, we determine I am this, I'm not that, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, I should do this, I shouldn't do that, I can do this, I can't do that, and all that keeps reflecting back on who I am, who I'm not. We develop shadows, we develop an ego identity, and we develop a map of reality. But it's not reality itself. I really want us to get that. It's not reality. It's a map of reality based on our extremely limited, and in some cases very distorted, experience of reality. It's a relative perception of an infinite perfection that becomes a projection, and then we create some protection and we put that picture in a frame on the wall of our mind until we have a gallery of images of reality, none of which are reality. They are at best symbolic representations of reality, and often at worst, and often, period, distortions of reality. And even if they're perfect, beautiful pictures, they're not reality because reality is infinite. It is not finite. And so all of that to say that if you can just get that basic idea that you're dealing with a map of reality, you're not dealing with reality. You're almost never, ever dealing with reality. And by reality, I don't mean merely what scientists call reality, which is that which can be measured. And we talked about that in the previous video. What can be measured is not reality. It's a relative perception and measurement of that which has currently emerged. And it's often, almost entirely, scientifically speaking, around material reality. And material reality, as I tried to make my case before, is not reality. It's one dimension of a much larger reality. There's matter and there's what matters, and they are not the same. You can't actually get any intrinsic value out of matter. This is the old philosophical is versus ought. It is, but it doesn't mean that it ought to be, and it doesn't mean that it has any meaning. The meaning is derived from us. Some of the meaning can be derived from how it functions in terms of our survival. But fundamentally, what matters to us most is not matter. Not dollar bills, not stocks, bonds, cabbages, and kings. What matters to us most is largely subjective, or so it seems. Love, peace, joy, fulfillment, purpose, meaning, connection, creativity, inspiration, all of these things that science tries to make a case for and tries to use evolution as its case, but cannot actually make a case. There's not actually an evolutionary need for us to have meaning. The cell will still divide, and we will still have sex, and we will still propagate and proliferate our species, even without art, even without music, even without poetry, even without meaning and purpose, beyond merely survival. So there's something evolving. That which makes life worth meaning, that which makes matter worth mattering, is what matters to us most. And science does not have the ability to measure that or to explain it. Fundamentally, science cannot explain consciousness. They cannot really explain why there's a someone here versus no one, why it's not just automatic. And that's the fundamental problem, is it that matter emerges from what matters, or that what matters emerges from matter? And I'm making the case that consciousness is not an emergent property of matter. Matter is not fundamental. Matter is an emergent property of consciousness. That which appears is emerging from that which is invisible, that which is immeasurable, but real. It's not real, because you can't get anything out of an absolute nothing. But you can get something out of a no thing, out of something that we cannot yet measure, and maybe never will measure with science, but we will tap into, understand, comprehend, and utilize through philosophy, through art, and through spirituality, such as meditation and contemplation. And the earliest nomads, mystics in the deserts, they were performing the first level of science, really, the first level of understanding reality, which was tapping into reality directly. And then over time, that needed to be codified more in order to use that information to understand the material world and create medicine and create engineering and create all the ways to function practically and scale the ability to feed each other and support each other and be safer and travel and communicate, all the wonders of science and technology, but which was the Great Enlightenment. But it cut us off from the foundation. This is all recap basically from yesterday. It cut us off from the foundations of reality, in my opinion and in my experience and in my research, that the foundations of reality are not material and are not measurable, at least by the tools we have today, or at least by science alone. They're more measurable, if I can even use that word, through other forms: contemplation, reflection, meditation, perhaps prayer, music, poetry, art, etc. And again, some of the greatest scientific discoveries have come from those that are willing to go beyond what can be measured, beyond what can be imagined, into this other liminal state. Einstein and his famous thought experiments, to ultimately pull forth an idea that was beyond all measurement, beyond all known science. Some of the greatest inventors, and surely some of the greatest artists and authors, they're pulling from something beyond what has been or what is, and it can literally revolutionize the world, because it is something coming from beyond our current map of reality. So why does all this matter? And what am I talking about today? So we're talking about the truth. And I'm going to make a case for why this is important in the grand scheme and as a way of living, and why it's important in our current situation in the world today. Because there's a lot of people out there that are talking about the truth that has very little relationship to truth at all. Or that have started with the spark of truth, and then what happens is the ego, that part of our being that needs to survive and needs to have an identity and needs to fit into our map of reality and needs to try to have a sense of power and control as a false or separate self from the rest of the ecosystem of humanity, it has to grab onto that quote unquote truth and use it now for survival and even for greater power. And so we see movements like Me Too movement. It started off with a real evolutionary need, the need for women to speak up, the need for men to listen, the need for abusive actions between men and women to stop, to be called out, and the anger and the frustration of women all justified a beautiful and necessary evolutionary unfoldment. But then very quickly, it gets grabbed by egos and must polarize. It must polarize into good versus evil, good versus bad, right versus wrong, which is the original sin and the original mistake. To believe there's such a thing as a power of good and a power of evil is to always have to find good and bad, right and wrong, and always have to polarize and always have to be in conflict. And I won't go into the full depth of that, I don't think, today, but all suffering stems from that belief. And I'm not saying that there's not discernment and that there's not a discernment of what's evolving naturally evolution, if you're honoring it, will lead you towards a greater expansive expression of life, that which serves life, versus that which does not serve life. You don't have to create categories of good and evil, but in the short term, you do have to have laws and structures to support what's growing in a way that it doesn't grow too much or too fast that it will destroy itself or others that are growing around it. That's the idea of democracy. There's enough freedom for exploration and mistakes and growth, but not so much freedom that you can take away another person's freedom by your expressions. That's all you really need. You don't need to make this wrong and this right in order to evolve. But again, that's a whole nother conversation, I think. But the point is, because of that, everything, once it emerges, gets polarized. And so then it turns into this conversation, this power struggle, which happened with the Me Too movement, where it was women are right, men are wrong, women are victims, men are victimizers. You know, it's all men's fault. It's the patriarchy. It's the toxic masculinity. And it starts to create this whole thing, and it loses all touch with reality and with the truth that is trying to emerge. And then it even has grown into another level when we saw with the Black Lives Matter. Again, racism exists. Systemic racism is bad. There's a history of racism. It's infiltrated as a virus into many institutions, justice, legal, all of these areas, and it must be addressed, and we must become available to the evolution of a world that is free and equal and works for all colors, races, creeds, etc., genders. So that's nobody can fundamentally disagree with that unless they just want to say I'm an overt racism or an overt white supremacist or a misogynist, whatever. But fundamentally, nobody can disagree with that premise. But where we lose it is, how do we get there? And so what happens is we have to polarize and say this is right, and then we have to tribalize and say we are the group of the right, or the left. I'm just meaning the right, meaning we're right and you're wrong. And that's tribalism and identity politics, and it has nothing to do with the truth anymore, and it has nothing to do with evolution really anymore, and it has nothing to do with reality anymore. And the first problem is to believe that you have the right answer and I have the wrong answer, or that I have the right answer and you have the wrong answer. Even the words I'm using right now are not the truth. As the Zen statement says, they're the finger pointing to the moon, they're not the moon. As it says in the Bible, the letter killeth, but the spirit giveth life. It's trying to say, if you focus on what can be measured, back to yesterday's talk, if you focus on the words, the symbols on a page, or the symbols I'm formulating out of my mouth, and you miss the spirit of it, you miss the underlying intention or what's really trying to unfold, or if you're listening more to me than what I'm listening to, you're going to get lost in the symbols, in the forms, in the material, in matter, and you're going to lose what matters, the spirit of it, the truth that is not your truth and not my truth, not Black Lives Matter's truth or the opposite side of the truth, not Me Too movement's truth or the opposites, not women's truth versus men's truth. No, not the left versus the right. By the way, you cannot fly without a left and a right wing. It's the truth in the middle. Nobody owns the truth. Nobody humanly is the truth. No words we can ever speak or write are the truth. They are all a tool to have an continual direct contact and experience with the truth. The truth is not objective. In other words, again, it's not something you can put in a box. Because if it was, it would be finite. Now, there are relative facts. You could say there are relative truths, but I caution to use the word truth, because you could say it's true the sun rose today. But even that is not an accurate statement. The sun did not rise. The planet evolved or revolved. And so it's a linguistic convenience to say the sun rose. More accurate would be the planet revolved. But based on what context? We could pull out even further, and at some point of truth, the planet's not even revolving. There's something bigger. Now, this is dangerous because you can then, it's all relative and there's no truth and there's nothing to stand on. And you can use that to start to, let's say, go into the area of gender and all the politics that's risen up around that, where now it's being said by certain liberal sectors that there's no such thing as gender. There's no such thing as man and woman. This is dangerous. And this is what I mean. There's no such thing as this can become dangerous. You have to be able to identify where we are right now. See a thing as it really is, not worse than it is, not better than it is, as it really is. And then see what it is meant to be or what is seeking to emerge. Now, some of the things I'm saying may sound very illiberal, and I have been in the past very much liberal and Democrat, and I'm becoming less pocketed by that. I'm neither right nor left. As I said, you need a left and a right wing to fly. I'm neither masculine, merely masculine, or feminine. I'm learning to open up to understand and have a relationship with both what's called good and what's called bad, what's called masculine or feminine, what's called left versus right, because none of them are the truth. They're all like in a house of mirrors. We're seeing different dimensions, reflections, and aspects of a truth that can never be fully named, but can be understood progressively. And the real meaning of liberal means the freedom to explore, the freedom to progress, the freedom of speech. And so truth is not objective, nor is it subjective, because we get in the same danger. Well, this is my truth. Well, there's no such thing as your truth. I know what you mean, but it's not actually true that you have your own truth. But it's important to know this is where I'm at. This is the facts of my circumstance. This is my feelings. But remember, or maybe for the first time you're hearing this, your feelings are not true. Your feelings merely tell you what you believe. What's the system software running? It's producing an emotional response, energy in motion. It's creating an energetic movement we call emotion, which is a clue to what you're thinking and believing. So that's the gift of emotion, besides the beauty of expressing it in different ways. It's and allowing you to experience life. It's showing you what you think and believe. But what you think and believe is not true, as I hope I've established. That's just your best guess at reality. And your best guess at reality, to take it all the way back, is based on your map of reality. And your map of reality was created from a survival place as a child, and even that's a fractal for humanity's evolution. We initially created a map of our human reality from a need to survive as a human species. That gets recapitulated in the child. And so you created a map of reality from a need to survive. I want you to get that. You didn't create a map of reality merely from a need to thrive and be the most amazing person you could be and to have the world of infinite possibility. For most of us, it was a map of reality created from a need to survive. And therefore, and it was a map of reality based on a lot of experience of fear, doubt, worry, pain, limitation, in some cases, trauma, right? It's all good. A lot of it's good. You needed that map then to survive, right? That's why you're still here, because you had at least a good enough map that you wouldn't just put your hand on a stove and burn to death, or you wouldn't go out in the middle of the street and get hit by a car, or you learned how to modulate how you showed up with others so they wouldn't punish you too much or reject you or leave you alone in the woods to die as a baby. You know, I'm being extreme. But so you created a map that was enough to survive and in some cases maybe to thrive. That's the map most people are using still in order to obtain certain code or thoughts in the collective, which then we think are our own thoughts, but they're not. Most of your thoughts, in fact, almost entirely, are not your own. They were here before you got here. You've just adapted or adopted them. Those thoughts then align with our map of reality. Our map of reality is like a net that catches certain thoughts, or like a radio station that obtains certain music and songs and all of that. And then that produces a certain emotional response that is a feedback system that affirms and confirms this is reality. This makes sense because it matches my map of reality. And then in the world of technology, that drives us towards conversations and social media platforms and all that, that builds an echo chamber where that gets fed back to us again and again and again. And now with technology and social media, it's designed literally to create an echo chamber so that you're constantly reinforced with what pisses you off, what scares you, what hurts you, what you love, what you want, so that you'll stay engaged. Now, I want you just to get that picture, because you think what you're seeing is truth, objectified, because it matches all those things. So truth is not objective. But I want you also to see, for all of you conspiritualists who think, see, he's saying it's all lies, the media is lies. But I want you to hear the other side. Truth is not subjective either. Your whole internal experience is as much false as the external experience. Now, I'm not saying it's all wrong or it's all bad or it's not necessary. I just want you to get truth is not objective and truth is not subjective. You're not experiencing the world as it is objectively, and you're also not experiencing the world as it really is subjectively. You're experiencing the world as you are. You're experiencing the world based on your map of reality. You get it? Now, why does all of this matter in our times just in general? Hopefully you already get it. But what's happened in our society right now, what's happening increasingly, is a chilling effect around the ability to explore our maps of reality in a way that allows us to extend the lines and the borders of our territory. Instead, it's creating the space where the only way to survive is to reinforce our map of reality, put up a fortress, put up guns, and cancel you if you disagree with me. Colleges creating safe spaces and microaggressions and the inability to have people speak that you disagree with without them being attacked, them having to have bodyguards, canceling and firing people because they do an opinion that you don't agree with. And now even canceling them because they had an opinion 10, 20, 30 years ago that doesn't match today. Can you see the insanity of this? And it's not just insane because it's insane on the surface. And it is insane on the surface. To want to get rid of anything that has any element of sexism, racism, or just ignorance from the past, because where we've evolved to today is not as ignorant, so-called, us woke culture, is not only insane, but it's like trying to eliminate history and thinking you're already over it all. Those that do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Likewise, those that want to cancel history are doomed to repeat it, and worse. And it's about where's it coming from. It's much better to be able to read a Huckleberry Finn or some old book or see some old statue and be able to talk about the historical implications of that. To see certain leaders that are alive today, and for them to be able to talk about where they were then, that they had some of these crazy views out of ignorance and they've evolved and they've grown, and here's how they've evolved and here's why they've grown, because we can learn from that. And it's a model that there's hope. But because they've changed from being stupid to smart, from being ignorant to less ignorant, from having some racist tendencies to not having them anymore, Obama being against gay marriage to being for it, whatever the case is, if that's not allowed, then none of us are allowed. Can you see that? None of us. And the chilling effect it puts on us in the present day is also to be walking on eggshells, to not be able to explore our maps of reality, to not be able to be humble and vulnerable, and to make a mess and make a mistake and apologize and learn and grow from our past and from our present and into the future. It's to freeze some polarized and very limited, in some cases, very destructive ideas in place and say, that's reality in my gallery of pictures in my mind. And if you don't like it, I'm going to cancel you, fire you, quit. You're not going to be my friend, whatever the case is. Okay, so that's one big reason. Because you think truth is objective or that truth is subjective, but it's not. It's infinite. It's infinite. You can replace truth for God if you're religious. You can truth as a philosopher, but truth is an infinite power, an idea, and a potentiality. And the only way we can evolve and progress and become the best versions of ourselves and ultimately live up to the promise of freedom, democracy, whether it's in the United States and beyond. There's one simple way that this can occur, and it's why in this democracy in the United States, freedom of speech is so critical. We must mature in our ability to recognize that what's been and what appears and what you think or I think or feel, none of that is reality or truth. But it's a good place to start. So let me hear what you think. Let me know what you feel. Let me honor and validate where you're at. Now let me share what I think and what I feel. And now let you notice where that triggers you, how that scares you and it disrupts your map of reality. That fear and that pain and that anger and that reaction to my perspective of reality is not being caused by my perspective of reality. It's being caused because it's pushing you to some edge of your reality, your map of reality. And it's showing you you're on a threshold of potential new territory. And so it's like, oh, that scares me, that upsets me, that hurts me. Wow, there's something here for me to really explore. And or the other person is being defensive and protective. And it's like, wow, there's something for me to explore. And then together with nuance, we can actually start to get down to what is the truth that is trying to emerge. There is not a truth on the left side, and there is not a truth on the right side. There is two halves of a greater whole. There's not a truth about men or just a truth about women. I mean, there are relative truths, but it's together in the masculine and the feminine principles when they're truly understood that the greater truth for both genders, there's not a truth that all whites are innately racist or all of America is innately racist and all blacks are innately victims. These are perspectives that carry facets of truth. But there's a lot more to the story. And if you search history and when real progress has been made, real evolution, it wasn't because an individual rose up to merely demonize one side of the story and make the other side saints and angels or just victims. Martin Luther King Jr. was a much broader, much more loving, much more accepting, much more open to conversation. Abraham Lincoln, in the way he brought together both sides to be actually in his cabinet and to argue and debate, he welcomed and he valued that. He could have never made the progress he did without that. Martin Luther King Jr. could have never made the progress he did, versus the opposite of a Malcolm X, who was and that party before Malcolm X changed. He was not about the truth. He was about, it's my way or the highway, and let's fight and let's kill and let's segregate out apart from them. Just another form of racism. Now, we can understand it. It's humanly and emotionally understandable and justifiable. why someone would take that point of view. But it's ultimately not helpful on either side, right? And so you see that in politics. The stronger the left side of the political spectrum wants to decree how bad the right is, make capitalism wrong, make whites wrong, make men wrong, make whatever wrong. This side, which is really not a separate person, but a separate polarity, is naturally going to fight back and make them more wrong. And now you have the left and the right wing of a bird fighting with itself. That bird ain't getting off the ground, folks, or it's going to crash. But it's also the case that that's happening inside of us, right? Because we think truth is objective or subjective, because we don't understand that we're reacting from a map of reality, not reality itself, because we've worshiped matter and materiality and that which can be seen and said, instead of increasingly becoming practitioners of that which can only be deeply understood and connected with, first within ourselves, and then through conscious conversation and communication that allows for nuance and absolutely allows for disagreements, not to prove each other wrong. But I like the great, I think it's a Buddhist sect, Tibetan Buddhists, I think, the way they will debate a principle and an idea with each other, not to prove the other guy wrong, but to sharpen and expand their understanding of the deeper truth. You see what I'm saying? So coming together and disagreeing and hearing different points of views, not to make the person wrong, not merely to acquiesce what we believe in, but because if we're sincerely being intellectually honest and rigorous with both reason and inner reflection, if people come together that have sincere intention to discover a greater truth so we can actually solve the greatest problems, racism, sexism, economic injustice, women's reproductive rights, a world that works for the highest good of all with enough abundance and enough opportunity for everybody to thrive. If we're going to really solve that and the planet's, a healthy and harmonious planetary, environment, if we're going to solve those, we'll never solve them by continuing to fight with each other or to fight within ourselves. We need to be able to tell ourselves the truth, even when it's scary. We need to, more than we want to fix, change, manipulate anybody, we need to be open to seeing and hearing and feeling the truth that we've been avoiding, the truth that hurts us and scares us. And we need to enter into conscious conversation where we can, by each other, courageously sharing and courageously and generously listening, we expand our territory. We actually go, if you're not having at least one aha a day where you're like, oh my God, I never saw it that way. Oh my God, I never heard it like that. Wow, that's a totally interesting opinion. Oh my God, that scares the crap out of me, but there's something in that for me. Oh my God, that makes me want to punch you in the face, but something about it's true. Like if you're not having some kind of moment on a daily basis, you're not engaged in the process of evolution. You're not listening to others enough. You're not listening to yourself enough. You're not taking some time for serious self-reflection. You're stuck in a map of reality, surrounded in an echo chamber, and you might as well be the walking dead. You're a zombie. So you want to be putting yourself in a position to constantly challenge lovingly and courageously your perspective and all perspectives. And then definitely with courage, share yours as well. And then with generous listening and back and forth, this dance of the yin and the yang, this dance of order and chaos, of masculine and feminine, of your quote unquote truth and my truth, of left and right, this dance, we will actually get to, like the great Zen koans, where they would pose a question to the student that was not answerable. Like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Show me the face of you had before your parents were born. These were not answerable. It required struggle and wrestling and contemplation and days, weeks, months, sometimes even years. And then all of a sudden it would open up a moment of insight where you see reality more. That's real change. That's real evolution. But without the ability to be with the truth and to be with the facts and to do this kind of rigorous self-reflection and conscious conversation, you can't ever get to the truth. You're just in your map of reality versus their map of reality, and they will clash and clash and clash until they destroy each other. And in the rubble and the ashes, the truth will finally be able to get free because there's not all these egos keeping it down. That's one way to go, right? We can be dragged kicking and screaming into the kingdom of heaven or into reality, or we can engage as mature beings and recognize that, yes, the truth will set us free. But first, it will scare the crap out of us, piss us off, and annihilate us. And that's just the way it goes. You must die daily to your opinions and to your limited perceptions and be reborn again and again and again of the spirit of truth, of what really matters. And then that which really matters will manifest as ever improved matter, as ever improved relationships and conditions. So I hope this serves you, inspires you, stirs you up, gives you something to think about. Share in the chat. What are your ideas? Share with friends that are atheists, scientists, rationalists on the other side of the equation. Let them come and listen. Let them share their opinions with me. I will engage in the comments in this conversation with you as a purpose of expanding our awareness of reality. And if you haven't checked out my podcast, Emergence, on iTunes, please check it out. Or go check out my YouTube channel, lots of other free content and trainings. You can also go to DerekRydall.com and under the free trainings, get a bunch of free trainings there. But stay engaged, stay inspired, and until next time, remember to live authentically, love unconditionally, and follow your destiny. Take care, everybody.